And yet the Vatican used him because they did not silence him, and he was able to say what he thought.
Right.
He was very pure party line Catholic, so
sure.
you know he's not going to go and touch the Madonna or Jesus or anything like that.
Sure.
But what he did for ufology was say that it is not against the Catholic religion to believe in extraterrestrial life because Jesus is called the King of the Universe 66 times in the Bible. And he also said that as far as evolution, he said we must be on the bottom rung of evolution because we are still killing each other and so forth. And these things he would say publicly in Switzerland, France, wherever he was invited, and even at the X conference here, I think it was in 2005.
Right.
And what happened was the Vatican used him to open a door that then was totally opened last year on the 13th of May, which is the anniversary of the Madonna Fatima. And it is no coincidence that that date was picked because the miracle at Fatima where the sun came down off the sky probably was a craft and they probably knew that.
Right.
So here, that date, Father Funes comes out and says, well, he says three things. It is not against your religion. Father Funes is now the new head of the observatory at Mount Graham and Castel Gandolfo.
Right.
He's a Jesuit, Argentinian Jesuit priest. This is printed in the official Vatican newspaper, the Osservatore Romano. He says, number one, it's not against your religion to believe in ETs. Number two, he says, they are brothers and sisters. He's not talking about the little grays, okay? The biggest danger is to believe that they look like us because Colonel Corso told me they would be walking the walls of the Pentagon and we couldn't recognize them. Well, that's why the Billy Meyer story was shut down because they were Palladians, they look like us, and then people would begin to get away from the mentality of the grays that scare you to death.
Sure.
And, you know, but there are people that look like us. And number three, Father Funes said that Jesus Christ didn't die for them because they didn't have original sin, which is setting up a brand new future doctrine for a future situation.
Say that last one again? I went to Catholic school for 13 years.
He said
so.
that the ETs don't have original sin. The only humans do, so Jesus didn't need to die for them.
Oh, I see.
Because the question that's asked is, if Jesus died for humanity, did he go to all these other planets and die too?
Right.
That's what everybody asks.
Right.
Did he die on the cross for these guys? They set up a new doctrine saying he didn't have to because they weren't born with original sin.
Right.
Well, as a journalist, I'm thinking, how do you know? Where are you coming off?
Right.
Where did you get that from?
Right.
Where'd you make that up from?
Well, then let me transition real quick to the second thing. This is something that seems to pop up all the time in these discussions, and it's almost like nobody quite knows what to do with it. Was the Monsignor or Father
Funes?
Do you know if they were associated with this mysterious SIV, this Vatican intelligence? And
no.
Is there some tie-in here?
Well, I think that Monsignor Bellucci was silenced during the end of his life, like Colonel Corso, because the Vatican announced his death 5 days after he died because they didn't want a massive funeral. Because they didn't want to bring up the problem of UFOs again since Funes had come out in May, Bellucci died in October.
Right.
All they would need is all these people coming to his funeral, which they would have come to. So they waited for 5 days saying it was the family that didn't want it, but I knew him because I'd spend New Year's Eve with him, I would eat with him, and he didn't have family.
Right.
He had no family.
Right, I've heard you make that comment before too.
For them to wait 5 days before they announced it, they don't want you getting excited about UFOs.
Sure.
The SIV situation has other problems because they're also involved in financial stuff and a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
Okay, the Vatican is not only a religious state, it is a political state.
Sure.
So they got more problems to think about than the ET problem.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
They have to deal with their internal politics problem, which is much worse.
It's expansive.
Yeah, and one of the, you know, Father Bellucci used to say before he died, one of the parts of the Fatima mystery is that it predicted the fall of the church. And he wanted to warn against that because he said with you know, he was party line Catholic, so he said a lot of heresy is coming into the church is going to fall. So, you know, Father Bellucci basically believed that we should keep the old rules.
Right.
That was his mentality, but he said the third Fatima thing said there would be a crumbling of it, so he was worried about that a lot. And if that happens, then there has to be a new institution that comes up that has to replace that. And that's where I'm wondering about that third pronouncement of Padre Funes.
Right.
You know, why are you talking about doctrine, about Jesus dying for people that didn't have original sin? I mean, where does that fit in?
Right.
And I write about these things in my book, All of the Above, because I have an article about the Vatican, and then I have an article about rock stars being the ones to come out with disclosure. Lately, a lot of movie stars, rock stars, Robbie Williams,
I just recently heard you say this in an interview. Yeah.
They are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Right.
A lot of them are contacted. I don't know how they get contacted, but Nina Hagen said she had a contact, and so did Robbie. Elvis Presley talked about this. I have an article about Elvis. I have an article about John Lennon and May Pang having a sighting.
Right.
I have these articles about these high-profile figures because I really believe that sometimes when humanity doesn't believe your regular contactee, they'll believe a high-profile figure.
Sure.
You know, and so I have a feeling that whatever group of ETs, and there's a whole bunch of them, are going to a lot of different people.
Right.
In other words, they're not the same. They're not all the Greys and all the Pleiadians. We don't just talk about two kinds. Clifford Stone and Colonel Corso said there were 57 different races categorized in the Pentagon.
Right. I heard Dr. Sala in an interview talking about how he had tried to cross-reference information and come up with several classes. Let me seize on a point you just made too, because it's kind of somewhere I was trying to go with this. There obviously needs to be a wider dialogue. You're somebody that's in a unique position to be seeing this from a more global perspective than a lot of us that are trapped here in America and just watch Fox News and whatever else. What sort of dialogue is going on internationally? Let me be very specific with the way I want to ask the question. Between the major religious groups, we're talking about the Vatican.
There isn't.
Exactly.
There is no dialogue. It's about this. It's about control of the planet.
Right.
The only way you're going to have this new world, if you can take it, which is Colonel Corso's phrase, the king of the alien, is you honestly need to have a revamping or a rediscovery of all the old institutions.
Right.
Right now we're having a crumble in the economy. You need to have a redistribution or a kind of looking at the other institutions. And we can't have a new world if you can't get rid of the old one.
Right.
So somehow the only way that we can survive this mess, and we're in a real mess, is a redoing of the institutions.
Right.
And I talk about this in my latest book with the Star Trek vision. You ought to do some research on Gene Roddenberry, okay? Because Gene Roddenberry was an insider. Gene Roddenberry channeled something called the Council of Nine. He was involved with Phyllis Schlemmer, Andrea Polharich,
right.
who was involved with, ESP and all that.
Right.
And Gene Roddenberry's asking this group of ETs about the world is in The Only Planet of Choice, written by Phyllis Schlemmer. And in Gene Roddenberry's vision, and there's some weird-looking things in Star Trek.
Sure.
In his vision, there is no money economy. You need to go back and look at Star Trek. It's about doing your homework.
That's very interesting.
If you could come to my lecture on Sunday, I'm going to talk about all of Hollywood, including Philip Dick.
Right.
Go look at his work, Blade Runner and Paycheck and all that, okay?
Sure.
When you look at that, he was an insider. He worked for the CIA too.
Right.
Okay, time travel, look at all of it. Look at all of it. Try to put it together yourself.
Right. I feel like I've done that with some of it. Some of this is certainly going to be new material, I'm sure.
Okay, because
I certainly look forward to it.
Yeah. So I mean, I have so much.
I'm sure you do.
In my brain that it's most of it is I try to put it in my books. I'm a very good friend of Uri Geller's. Okay, Uri Geller is to me as close to a hybrid as you're ever going to get on this planet. Okay, he's very weird.
That's very interesting. These other institutions, I'll just press on the religious thing one more time because I happen to be a survivor of the World Trade Center attacks in New York. I was in the North Tower, and one of the things that motivated me to do was to try to broaden my understanding of Islam, and I really feel like I've done a very successful job of that. I have a lot of information on that, and what I've seen, something that really shook me up was a map that was published by the National Counterterrorism Center. I could even forward this to you. It's actually in a calendar that they published that's sort of like that deck of cards everybody had heard about with all the pictures of terrorists on it. This map shows what they refer to as the Pan-Islamic Caliphate, the sort of the Islamic empire of the modern day. And it literally stretches across southern Europe and northern Africa all the way across into Asia and covers a huge, area. If you're talking about the crumbling of the church and you're talking about some of these other things, the